of their leaders and members for conspiring to terrorize the District of Columbia, for unlawfully interfering with our country's peaceful transition of power, and for assaulting our men and women in blue who valiantly defended the Capitol, the district, and our freedoms. Specifically, we're bringing this lawsuit pursuant to local and federal laws, including the Ku Klux Klan Act of 1871, a Reconstruction-era federal law designed to protect our country against violent conspiracies, protect our citizens against violent conspiracies, like the attack that took place on January 6. In the complaint, which has been filed and is public, we specifically allege that these vigilantes, insurrectionists, and masters of a lawless mob conspired against the District of Columbia, its law enforcement officers and residents by planning, promoting, and participating in the violent attack on the United States Capitol. We further allege the named defendants caused substantial and provable damage to the District of Columbia, and in particular to our courageous law enforcement officers who risked their lives, and some even died, to defend the Capitol, the district, and our country's freedoms. As the Independent Attorney General, I have the responsibility to enforce our laws and hold these violent defendants accountable because they cause actual physical and financial harm to our city, its employees, and our residents. So, we've brought this suit for 4 reasons. First, accountability. Holding wrongdoers accountable is an American value, and it's at the core of my legal responsibilities. The defendants, as you know, were not tourists, nor were they acting patriotically. They were vigilantes, members of a mob, insurrectionists who sought to crush our country's freedoms. Second, deterrence. Our country is a country of laws. We certainly can and do disagree on a plethora of issues, both big and small. However, in the United States of America and in the District of Columbia, we resolve our disagreements in a civil, non-violent manner. Those who don't play by these rules must be held responsible to deter future violent and undemocratic conduct. Restitution and recompense is the third reason why we're bringing this suit today. Because in our country, when an individual or entity suffers physical, mental, and financial injury caused by the illegal act of others, the victims are entitled to restitution and recompense. We all agree that the tragedy of pedestrians hit by a vehicle by walking on a crosswalk are deserving of restitution and recompense at the very least. So too are law enforcement officers who were injured in the course of stopping a violent mob hell-bent on taking away our freedoms. Again, restitution and recompense, those are American values. And in this case, the defendants' unlawful actions caused the district to deploy unprecedented resources to repel and defeat an attack on our country's capital. During the height of the attack, approximately 850 members of the Metropolitan Police Department were at the Capitol and the immediate area surrounding it. Scores of officers required emergency medical treatment and continue to receive physical and mental health treatment today as a result of physical injuries and trauma that in many cases will last a lifetime. These costs, including the unavailability of officers who are not able to immediately return to their jobs of protecting D.C. residents, are substantial. And we will, through this lawsuit, seek to impose severe financial penalties on the organizations and individuals responsible. Finally, we filed this suit to seek justice for the brave men and women of the Metropolitan Police Department. Police officers sign up to protect our residents. This is true. But they don't sign up for war on our country. They don't sign up to being attacked by an armed mob, beaten with bats, poles, and fists, dragged down stairs, kicked and stomped by thugs. My mind goes to Metropolitan Police Department Officer Michael Fanone, a veteran officer who himself voted for President Trump in 2016. Obviously, Michael Fanone defended the Capitol on January 6, and video evidence of Officer Fanone's testimony reveal that he fought valiantly against the mob. In doing so, he succumbed to the violent mob and was dragged down those Capitol steps. Officer Fanone suffered a heart attack and a concussion as he was repeatedly shot with a taser or shotgun and physically beaten. In Officer Fanone's own words, "Some guys started getting a hold of my gun and they were screaming out, 'Kill him, kill him,' with his own gun." A father of four, Officer Fanone pleaded for his life. Fortunately, but not before ending, physically hurt and mentally traumatized, Officer Fanone survived. Ladies and gentlemen, MPD Officer Gunther Hashida and Officer Kyle D. Freitag and a third MPD officer, Jeffrey Smith, also put their lives on the line on January 6th, and they suffered mightily. Sadly, they took their own lives afterwards. This lawsuit seeks justice for them, their families, and the many officers who still live with the pain from January 6th. Let me thank you for gathering here today. Now let me pass the mic to Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton, who has spent her life fighting for the equality that this country aspires for. She has spent her life fighting for the freedoms and democracy that the police officers fought for on January 6th. It is my honor to introduce you again to Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton.
Thank you, Attorney General Racine. I appreciate how you have laid out the purposes for this press conference, and I particularly appreciate the lawsuit that you so creatively are bringing. I am pleased to welcome to the Capitol our other guests, whom you will hear from shortly. On January 6th, the U.S. Capitol was attacked by individuals seeking to overturn our democratic form of government, while President Trump refused to send in the D.C. National Guard to the Capitol. The Metropolitan Police Department voluntarily responded, protecting the Capitol, Congress, and democracy itself. Despite the ongoing attack, Trump delayed in deploying the D.C. National Guard to defend the Capitol for hours. To ensure this would never happen again and to provide greater home rule and equality for the district, I was able to get included in the House-passed National Defense Authorization Act my D.C. National Guard Home Rule Act, which would give the D.C. mayor control over the D.C. National Guard. I am very disappointed, however, that Republicans fought this provision and it was dropped from the final version of the National Defense Authorization Act. In their work defending the Capitol on that day, D.C. and the Metropolitan Police Department, in particular, of course, incurred expenses. I was able to secure a $9.1 million federal payment to the district in an emergency supplemental appropriations bill that was signed into law in July to compensate D.C. for the direct costs of responding to the attack. It is appropriate that the perpetrators of the attack compensate D.C. for the other costs D.C. incurred that day, including for medical treatment and paid leave, which are outside the scope of the funding I was able to secure for the district. From damage to police property to medical expenses related to the attack, the perpetrators, by the perpetrators, including Proud Boys and Oath Keepers, must pay the District of Columbia. I strongly support and appreciate the filing of this lawsuit.
Good morning. My name is Charles Allen. I'm the Ward 6 council member, and you're in Ward 6, so I represent the neighborhood around the Capitol. When I heard the Attorney General talking about September 11th, I couldn't help but look up at this blue sky and remember that day. And I think that January 6th will be as important in our nation's history as September 11th is. I'm here to say that I am in full support of Attorney General Racine's efforts to hold accountable those who carry out a premeditated, a coordinated attack, not only on our nation's capital, but on our home and on our MPD officers and on our residents. The impact of January 6th, it was felt nationwide, but few Americans, I think, experienced it as personally as we did. The insurrectionists intentionally created a situation that ultimately cost the lives and endangered many more. It's difficult to describe the terror that our residents, my constituents, felt during this insurrection. The pain, confusion that we collectively experienced as we saw a mob descending on our venerated institution and desecrating it. The concern we had for our neighbors who work in this building. I also have oversight for the first responders of the district. And I can tell you that our men and women in law enforcement and EMS, fire and EMS, they put their lives on the line today. And still today, they are suffering the emotional and physical harm that they experienced. I've talked with many officers. It was their first time even going inside that building, and they carry it with them, and the emotional and psychological harm and pain is something that they will be fighting and working on for the rest of their lives and careers. Today's suit is one way that we can demand accountability, and frankly, healing as both a community, a city, and a nation. I want to thank Attorney General Karl Racine and his team, all the partners that have been a part of this, for their work to seek justice for D.C. residents, as we are too often an afterthought, even when national affairs play out in our very own front yard. Last January, my two children were 8 and 4 years old, and we lived just a couple of blocks that direction. And recognizing that I have to tell them, and they will read about the history of what happened on January 6th. And my hope is that measures like this, actions that we take today, will also be part of that story that's told as they get older, as generations come to understand what was at risk on January 6th and the ways in which we came together to fight back, to preserve our democracy, and hold those who put it in jeopardy accountable. So thank you to the Attorney General, Karl Racine, and to everybody who's a part of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Attorney General Racine, Congresswoman Norton, Councilmember Allen, Jonathan Greenblatt, and the ADL team for bringing us together today. We're so grateful to have you as partners in this groundbreaking case. My name is Joanna Lidgate. I'm the CEO at the States United Democracy Center. We're a bipartisan team of former federal and state officials, law enforcement leaders, and security experts, and we help states protect our elections and our democracy. Before States United, I served as the Chief Deputy Attorney General for the state of Massachusetts, the top law enforcement office in the state. I got to work with colleagues across the country, including my good friend Karl Racine, to fight on behalf of everyday Americans and uphold the rule of law. A year ago today, on December 14th, 2020, presidential electors representing both parties met in all 50 states and the district to choose our next president. The electors did their jobs, and then they sent their choices to Congress to certify the will of the American people. On January 6th, 2021, the world watched in horror as a mob attacked the beautiful grounds we're standing on and the Capitol behind me. It wasn't just an attack on our members of Congress and our public safety officers. It was an attack on our democracy. It was an attack on the American people who made their voices heard in record numbers at the ballot box. Our government leaders were there on January 6th to affirm the will of the American voters. Our public safety officers were there to protect and serve. They were attacked for simply doing their jobs. That's why Republicans and Democrats alike condemned the violence and committed to preventing anything like it from happening again. And that's what this case is about. It's about holding the Proud Boys, the Oath Keepers, and dozens of insurrectionists accountable for the violent assault on our democracy and the trauma they inflicted on the district and public safety officers that day. This case is about consequences, and it's about prevention. And while some would like to act like we can just move on from the horrors of January 6th, that would be irresponsible and dangerous. Right now, we're witnessing a major increase in political violence in America. Election lies and conspiracy theories helped fuel the insurrection, and those same lies pose a serious threat to our country today. Every day, because of those lies, our state and local election officials, the trusted guardians of our democracy, face violent threats and harassment. The attack on our democracy is far from over, and if we don't take action, we risk letting violence become a feature of our political life. We won't let that happen. We're a nation of laws, and there are serious consequences, legal and financial, for trying to hijack an election. History tells us that accountability is critical to moving forward. This case joins a powerful line of lawsuits holding perpetrators of political violence accountable, from the organizers of the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville to the Aryan Nation and the Ku Klux Klan. Democracy isn't just an institution or a process. It's a living, breathing thing, a set of ongoing challenges. While the solution to all of those challenges certainly can't be found in the courtroom, the justice system has a pivotal role to play. This case is about justice for the district and for the brave officers who risked their lives on January 6th. Our capital and our country are still healing and processing, and too many families will never recover from the loss and trauma inflicted that day. We keep them in our hearts. Today, we also reaffirm our commitment to safeguarding the democratic system, the American foundation that those officers and those members of Congress were there to protect. This is an all-hands-on-deck moment. We are fighting for the future of our democracy, and we couldn't have better partners in that fight than the people standing with me here today, the amazing team of lawyers, the ADL, and leaders across this country like Attorney General Racine. Thank you.
Thank you, Attorney General Racine, Delegate Norton, Councilmember Allen, for having me here today, along with my colleague Joanna Lidgate from States United. ADL is the oldest anti-hate organization in the world, and we are truly honored to work with you on this landmark lawsuit on behalf of the District of Columbia against the Proud Boys, the Oath Keepers, and more than 30 individuals who coordinated an act of domestic terrorism against our democracy right here in this place. We take this responsibility seriously. For more than 100 years, ADL has worked to stop the defamation of the Jewish people and to secure justice and fair treatment to all. To deliver on that mission, We have been at the forefront of strategically monitoring, exposing, and countering extremist threats from across the ideological spectrum. ADL's experts tracked the planning for the January 6th attack on the Capitol. We helped to identify the perpetrators and any connections that they had to groups like the Proud Boys and Oath Keepers. And we are deeply honored now to be putting that expertise at the service of the District of Columbia and the brave officers who were injured or killed on a result of that day. No one will forget the images we saw on January the 6th. And for the Jewish community, seeing individuals wearing anti-Semitic t-shirts with images like Camp Auschwitz on them while storming the Capitol building was particularly searing and traumatic. Make no mistake, January 6th was not a peaceful protest. Indeed, it was the most predictable terror attack in the history of our country. Countless law enforcement officers suffered physical injuries and lasting emotional trauma. 4 officers who responded that day have died by suicide. We are here fighting for justice for them, for the sanctity of our nation's capital, and for our democracy, because the violence perpetrated on that day, while unique in its severity and scope, was far from an isolated occurrence. It did not happen in a vacuum, and it did not end when the crowd dispersed. The attack on the Capitol took place against a political and cultural backdrop of hate and extremism that has proliferated and gone largely unchecked over the last 5 years. Extremism has been normalized. Hate has been amplified. This is about turning back that tide. And it is important because those who perpetrated the attack will not readily abandon their convictions. Domestic extremists like the Proud Boys, the Oath Keepers, and others continue to present a serious, credible, and dangerous threat to our democracy and to us all. We must respond with all of the tools at our disposal. We are all at risk if we fail to do so. Accountability for January the 6th is critically important to preventing another violent insurrection from happening in D.C. or in state capitals across the country. And that is why I am so proud and so humbled to be standing here today alongside this courageous and talented team. Thank you. And now I'll hand it back to Attorney General Racine.
Okay, we're prepared to take any questions that you might have.
General Racine, do these guys have any assets? Two parts. Do they have any assets that you could recoup? And then it's my understanding that this KKK Act has been used in the past to basically put extremist groups out of business, just bankrupt them. Is that your intent here?
Our intent, as we indicated, is to hold these violent mobsters and these violent hate groups accountable and to get every penny of damage that we can. Let me tell you, if it so happens that we bankrupt them, then that's a good day. When hate is dispatched and eliminated, that's a good day. And so, yes, we're using the Ku Klux Klan Act and other laws to absolutely bring as much financial pain, hit them in the pocket as possible. And sir, your question is excellent because the history will show that when these acts like the Ku Klux Klan Act and other laws were used against hate groups, what did they do? What did cowards do? They go running. They go hiding. They get decentralized, and frankly, they're less dangerous. When, as is the case today, as my colleagues noted, These groups are celebrated, told to stand back and stand by. What does that mean? That means that they are empowered. And so this is all about disempowering hate that would take your freedom away, my freedom away, and those of our children.
Mr. AG, the DC Superior Court judge.
Please, Congresswoman wants to speak.
I strongly agree with what the Attorney General Racine just said. We have no idea whether these people have any assets. I certainly hope they don't, as a matter of fact. But this lawsuit is important to have a deterrent effect. They're going to have to defend it. They're going to have to spend money defending it. So if we don't get a penny in restitution, this lawsuit's deterrent effect will say, be prepared to spend money to defend yourself because we are coming after you. Thank you, Mr. Attorney General.
That's actually related to my question for both you and the AG. A DC Superior Court judge issued a default judgment against the Proud Boys earlier this year for just ignoring a suit by the DC church that was vandalized in the Black Lives Matter sign. And also the Oath Keepers lawyer dropped them a month ago for failure to communicate and for not paying him. So what makes you confident that there will be restitution and recompense in this suit?
Well, as the Congresswoman said, whether there is in fact restitution or recompense, accountability is important. But through a case, as you know, and I sure hope they try to defend the case. Again, cowards, what they do, they pick on people, they bully, and when you punch back, they run away. But if they do defend this case, there's a process called civil discovery. And we can't wait to propound searing questions about the finances of these individuals and these groups. From where did the money come? Those are questions that we'll get at the root at in this lawsuit.
Related to the civil discovery, a lot of the evidence in my brief read of the complaint seems related to the federal investigation here and what federal prosecutors have found during the course of their investigation. Have you had any conversations with the U.S. Department of Justice about this lawsuit, and will there be sharing of any potential discovery that comes?
So I think at this point it wouldn't be appropriate for me to talk about conversations that may have occurred between the Office of Attorney General and this legal team and the Department of Justice. I do think it is important to emphasize that our case is a civil case. I think it's also important to emphasize that federal judges, let's be honest, you've reported this, federal judges have been deeply concerned at the extent of the penalties that have been assessed via certain plea agreements. I can guarantee you that as we proceed, we are going to seek the maximum level of financial penalty. Next question, please.
Sir, another criminal justice matter. DC has released its audit of the forensic crime lab. I know you've been an advocate for releasing that. I'm curious, do you believe any of your cases will be in jeopardy?
So the reporter is asking a question regarding local DC matters that are quite serious concerning our independent forensic lab. That's the lab that plays an important role in processing evidence and, of course, evidence that is submitted in a criminal trial where liberty is at stake. The allegations around the Department of Forensic Services have been going on for at least 15 months, and as you well stated, the Office of Attorney General and the U.S. Attorney's Office of the District of Columbia have clearly and repeatedly stated their grave concerns about the state of that agency. With this report, the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of Columbia and certainly the Office of Attorney General have been vindicated because we blew the whistle, others scapegoated. And as to your question as to whether criminal cases may have been compromised, the report in fact recommends that criminal cases that utilized forensic evidence, that's guns, DNA, fingerprint, and the like, be reviewed since the inception of the Department of Forensic Services. This is a serious matter, but we're here today to talk about January 6th and the attempt to take away our freedoms. Thanks for the question. I can't tell you right now. I can tell you that we have begun a review of those cases, and certainly integrity in convictions, whether they're juvenile cases or adult cases. And as you know, the U.S. Attorney's Office here in the district is the principal prosecutor. I disagree with that notion of adults. And so certainly we'll be joining forces with them to do what's right and fair and to ensure that those who may have suffered criminal sanctions were properly convicted.
Can we go back to January 6th?
Please.
So there seems to be some question in some people's minds about whether this was kind of a spontaneous insurrection or whether it was planned specifically in advance. Are you alleging in this lawsuit that these individuals conspired
Yes.
well in advance?
Yes. And I think that my friend Jonathan Greenblatt said it best. The red flags, the alarms, the shouts, the screams, the chatter were as loud as can be. And thank God for journalists, because you're probing this deeply. And that's what you're finding.
And how high do you think that conspiracy went?
Look, this Capitol literally went undefended for nearly 3 hours plus. I don't know about you. I always look for a story at the start, the middle, and the end. The start was when people started talking about come to Washington, D.C. on January 6th. It's going to be wild. The middle was more incitement around January 5, and obviously even before then. These groups were organizing. They were telling people this is the time. They were planning, and don't forget, there were bombs planted in Council Member Allen's ward at the DNC and at the RNC. And what was the end? Time to leave. I think from the beginning, from the middle, and to the end of this story, there is explicit evidence of conspiracy. Yes.
But you haven't named former President Trump in this lawsuit.
That is correct. This lawsuit is focused on the individuals and the entities that organized, planned, and participated in the mob activity on January 6th. As to President Trump, let's be clear. I believe that the Office of Attorney General for the District of Columbia, and I'll tell you, my great colleagues on the Democratic AG side of the aisle, have sued the president over 153, former president, over 153 times during his tenure. Now look, I like baseball and statistics. When you win 80% of your cases that you file against the President of the United States, you know what that means? That means you've called out lawless behavior. So we're not afraid to sue presidents or former presidents. Our investigation and our work continues.
Last question.
Sam?
Yes, sir. I'm just curious about the neighborhood thing here.
Charles?
So, I know you were fighting to get fences down and things like that. I mean, I guess it was kind of beyond just what happened here. What do you have to say about that?
I sometimes get asked about why do neighbors care so much about a building where we don't have a full vote, right? Congressman Norton does the absolute most you will ever find without a vote for D.C. and is the most amazing champion we've got. But we felt a certain kind of way when we watched our Capitol be attacked. And when we also saw fences go up afterwards, we wanted those fences down because this is the people's building. This is a space where our elected officials make the decisions for us, where my neighbors and constituents spend their careers and they work and they give. And to see it attacked is deeply traumatic to the neighborhood, because this isn't just a dome that we see, on shots on Monday Night Football. This is our backyard. This is our space. And to see it attacked and desecrated this way, in this coordinated, hateful fashion, will strike a chord with every resident, not just in Ward 6, but across D.C.
Yeah, I'd like to say a word about the fence, because the fence was an abomination, so much so that I had a bill in Congress to make sure this fence would be taken down. You will notice that there's no fence here, but we spent almost a full year with the fence up, making it impossible for this park. This is what it is. This is a park as far as the neighborhood is concerned, and a deterrent to our people in the United States for reaching their own capital. It took me a full year to get this fence down, but it was another remnant of what we experienced on January 6th.
Let me just add one more thing. It's hard, of course, to add anything when Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton speaks, or my great friend Charles Allen, and certainly Joanna, and Mr. Greenblatt. But as to the District of Columbia, we want in. We want in. We want to be a state. We want Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton to vote. Imagine if she had a vote. She's so powerful without one. So what do people do when they want in? Remember what the slaves did? They fought for their freedom. What do people want? What do people do when they want in? World War I, World War II, African Americans, the Tuskegee Airmen, they fight for our country's values. In D.C., we want in. That's why our men and women in blue, some died, because the District of Columbia should have representation in this House. Thank you.